everyone, beautiful fall weather is finally here, which means it's time to update our watercolor palettes. Lots of golds, oranges, reds, and warm greens, of course, and I'm super excited to share my favorite 10 watercolor pigments for fall-inspired paintings. As always, I will tell you a little bit about the properties of each pigment, and we will also explore how they work together and separately on some fall-inspired compositions. You will see some perennial classics like quinacridone gold, but you may also discover some new gorgeous colors to get your creative juices flowing. As a bonus, I will also quickly bring out two of my all-time favorites that I use all throughout the year, not just for the fall. Let me know in comments below if you think I've missed any essentials or if you're loving a pigment I didn't mention. If you've seen a video where I cover my all-time favorites, you know that I generally favor three brands: Daniel Smith, Winsor Newton, and Core Watercolors. So Daniel Smith is an all-around classic favorite with a huge range of high-quality watercolor pigments. Core Watercolors by Golden are my favorite. They're super vibrant, modern watercolor alternative because they use a unique formulation, a special binder not used in any other watercolor, and it really accentuates the luminosity and brilliance of pigments. So these colors typically are much more pigmented. And to round this up, of course, you'll see another classic that never disappoints: Winsor Newton watercolors. And as I always said, please remember that the best palette is, of course, your palette. So don't take my recommendations as a rule. It's simply a recommendation, a suggestion, and a way for you to find some new additions to your collection, because as you know, I'm totally obsessed with colors and will try them all so I can bring you the most vibrant and exciting high quality choices for every season. So let's get right into it. Let's start with these golds and oranges because it's a perfect season to explore warm pigments and create some beautiful gold-based mixtures. I want to start with this gem because it's one of my all-time favorites and I use it all the time, but especially in the fall. It's called Transparent Pyro Orange, and my favorite one is from Daniel Smith, but I also like the one from Core. It's a bit darker. Here you can see them side by side. I generally prefer Core versions, but if I had to choose for the fall, I'd go with Daniel Smith because it's a bit lighter and comes out a bit more like a typical orange, and it's really good for mixtures. So it's a clear, non-granulating, warm reddish orange that makes a really perfect smooth wash, and it's also great for mixing and layering. The color is super vivid but also transparent and has excellent light fastness, so you can add it to your mixtures either on a palette or directly on paper the way I do to add a golden glow to your foliage. And of course you can use it straight from the tube for shadows like I'm doing here on the sunflower. I also use it quite a bit in watercolor backgrounds when I'm pouring color straight on paper. It's so smooth and creates these wonderful pockets of gold and orange color. The second fall pigment I love is, I think, everyone's favorite, quinacridone gold. So how can I not include this one, right? It's a transparent staining color that used to be available back in the day in its pure form. Unfortunately, pure quinacridone gold has been discontinued everywhere because, believe it or not, the primary consumer of this pigment was actually automotive industry, and I guess they no longer need it. But there's so many gorgeous substitutes available, and I love the one from Core, which is a mixture of quinacridone and nickel complex azo pigments. They also have quinacridone gold deep, which I'm dying to try, but here we are with a classic quinacridone gold, and it will add the warmest, most beautiful glow to your painting, like you see me do here on the sleeve. I'm covering the veins with quin gold, and mixing it with Pearland Violet and Quinacridone Red on the edges of the leaf. I also love pouring Quinacridone Gold and mixing it with other watercolors for my backgrounds. It's really great for creating kind of bursts of golden light, and it's just so lovely. Next, golden orange is this Quinacridone Burnt Orange by Core. Again, Core is my choice for this one. It's quite close to Brown Matter by Winsor & Newton, but Core version is so intense, and it's basically my choice for anything deep golden brown, and you can layer it to achieve a very dark look like I'm doing here. It's super staining, excellent in terms of light fastness, and non-granulating, which I honestly prefer for the most part. I really don't like granulation, although I know for those of you who love loose watercolors, granulating ones are a lot of fun, and we'll have some granulating pigments just in a minute. But for now, you can see this one would be great for dry leaves, for branches. You can see me glazing it on some tree leaves, and it mixes super well with a wide range of greens, which is exactly what we need for fall leaves. Here you can see me layering together with sap green, wet on wet. I just love it. And you also may have seen me use it on some late flowers of the summer for outlines and for shadows. To conclude our yellow golds, we need a mild, warm yellow, and I have a very traditional choice, this Winsor yellow. By the way, if you want something yellow that's wild and brilliant, I actually recommend Nickel Azo yellow from Core. It's super vivid, very staining, and will brighten up any subject. I use it a lot, but if I had to choose one for my top 10, having a warm yellow is more important. So Core Azo yellow did make it to my list, but I still love it. So here you can see me using this Winsor yellow as my background layer for some leaves, and it's just a beautiful classic warm yellow that you need and that you might really enjoy for your fall palette. Now let's talk about the greens, because of course we still have lots of greens in the fall, but it's quite different from summer or spring greens, and we'll need some gold green options and also some moody bluish dark greens. So starting with Pearland Green, I feel like this pigment is very important for fall because it will give you those deep dark tones that you need even in a sunny fall landscapes, but especially if you want to paint moody, rainy fall landscapes and you want to add some intensity and emotional punch to your work, so to speak, this is the right color for you. It's semi-transparent, you can layer it to achieve an almost black kind of look, but you can also dilute it without affecting its light fastness. And here's an example where I'm using it on a bright, sunny fall landscape as wet on dry glaze on top of my tree leaves, creating nice dark areas that make a warm orange and yellow stand out right away. It blends beautifully with all the other pigments that I'm covering, as you can see on this leaf. It's so necessary to create contrast, to accentuate light. And here you can see me mixing it with all sorts of colors, wet on wet. And now another example where I cover larger areas of paper with this green as I'm making my way through the leaves of my sunflowers. It's exactly the right value, and the beautiful blue undertones of this pigment help me keep my leaves in the shadow, allowing the warm, bright flowers to stand out. So really, I think you can't get away without Pearland Green for your fall palette. Now, this is a wonderful color that you can use for all your botanicals and especially in autumn foliage, green gold. And I like two versions, one from Daniel Smith, one from Core. For this particular palette, I think I actually prefer Daniel Smith because it's super smooth, and as you can see here, I'm using them side by side. Core on the left, Daniel Smith on the right. The Daniel Smith version is a bit more gold, and it has really bright yellow undertones. They shine through in very thin glazing applications, and it allows that golden highlight to be seen with just a hint of green. Finally, I really love my sap green for my fall leaves. It's a very rich, almost golden brown green. It mixes beautifully with golds, oranges, yellows, but also reds and purples, and I find that it's a really necessary color. Now I use it also in my summer palette quite a bit. It's very warm, but in this case I think it's definitely worthy of being included in our top 10 for the fall. You can see lots of examples of me using it on sunflowers, trees, leaves. If you're thinking about painting a pumpkin where you have lots of sort of spot green color, it is absolutely perfect. Love it. It's using PY150, which is the same pigment used in green gold that we just discussed. So it's sort of similar, but not exactly as vibrant, and it won't stand out as much. So if you are more into natural looking, sort of more muted landscapes, I think this is the right choice for you, and I use it quite a bit, as you can see here. Now, I know you want to hear all about the reds because, of course, we need to add a splash of red color when we're painting fall compositions. So I have two reds in my top 10. One is a warm red and another one is cold. So you have a lot of flexibility with mixtures that they create. So the first one, my warmer red, is Pyro Red Medium from Core. It's an excellent light, fast color. And by the way, I really enjoy this pigment in my acrylics, so it's just an amazing red all around. You can see here I'm using it on the leaf, and on the right hand side, just for comparison, I'm gonna use the second red from our top 10 palette, and this one is Carmine by Daniel Smith. This is my cool red, and I first heard about this color from Jane Blundell's blog, as she mentioned that she keeps it in her top 20 watercolors, her favorites of all times, and I really love it for its properties and the ability to create beautiful, smooth mixtures. I tried it last year and immediately fell in love. It's sort of similar to Permanent Alizarin Crimson, which is quite popular, but it's much more intense and much more staining, more dramatic, I find. The nice thing is that because it's super light fast, it will also dilute well in water without affecting its permanence. So really you can't go wrong with Carmine. It's basically the darkest red that I was able to find, which makes it perfect for dark leaves, and not to mention beautiful red roses that you can find late in the summer and in the fall. So if you love botanical art, it's just a wonderful pigment to have in your palette. But here we're talking about the fall, so pure red leaves, red and green leaves, green foliage with some red highlights, red mushrooms. It's so good. And also, as per Jane's suggestion, if you mix this pigment with its complement color, which is phthalo green, you can get a nice neutral color like this. Finally, we need a blue to complement our palette, and I always feel like the typical choices of ultramarine or like my favorite phthalo blue just don't work quite well for the fall because they tend to look way too intense and deep and too sort of vibrant and overpowering when they're close to typical fall colors. So I go with cobalt blue from Core. It's much milder and will allow you oranges and greens to stand out much better. What I mean by overpowering is take a look at these sunflowers, and here I use phthalo blue and ultramarine. Look at how my sky overpowers the yellow of the petals. It's just way too vibrant. So cobalt blue is a much better choice in my opinion. It's not too green, not too red. It's very, very mild, sort of like a perfect primary blue. And it will help you make beautiful granulating washes, perfect for a mid-fall sky. And you can see here I'm using a very light wash, so my trees really stand out. So with this, we complete our top 10 fall specific pigments, but as I promised, that's not all. And here are 2 more very important pigments that didn't make the list because they're in my top 10 of all-time favorites for any season, not just for the fall, but I also use them quite a bit in my fall palette. The first one is Hansa Yellow Deep from Daniel Smith, and the second one is Perylene Violet. And you know, if you've seen any of my tutorials, any of my previous pigment reviews, I absolutely love Hansa Yellow Deep for botanical subjects like tulips and marigolds. It's a perfect deep warm yellow. I can't imagine painting a sunflower or like a golden pumpkin without it. And if you want a super intense version of this pigment, you can get one from Core. They call it Diarylite Yellow. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And it will give you that kind of in between yellow and orange, very smooth, warm color. The second pigment I wanted to mention, and you need it for some foliage, it's a Perylene Violet. And you may have heard me say before that I use it a lot instead of black whenever I paint trees or flowers, and I need like a really dark spot color for branch or for flower stamens. It's really perfect to make sure that your palette stays natural, to use sort of either a mixture of your darker colors, or in my case I love Perylene Violet, and you have this option to create a really good contrast but keep your overall composition and color palette cohesive and without introducing harsh black tones. So here it is, the list of my fall watercolors. Let me know what you think. If I missed anything, if you have any other favorites, let me know in comments below. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe, and I will be back next week with some step-by-step tutorials of some fall subjects. Have a wonderful, colorful week. I'll see you guys next week. I'll see you guys soon.